Welcome to my 1 to 99 and 120 Slayer guide for 2019. So when you're ready, grab your cup of tea, sit back, relax and enjoy. In this guide I'll be covering a variety of things you can find timestamps for in the description below, because this will certainly be a very long guide. I'll start by talking about why you should train Slayer. I'll continue by talking about the useful skills, items, quests for Slayer experience. Then I'll talk about the general gear setups, or just giving you guys some examples. I'll continue by talking about the Slayer Masters and where they're located, Slayer and Reaper points and how to spend them. And then finally, the largest part of the video will be me talking about the different Slayer training methods, the prefer and block tasks, what you should do for Slayer at the beginning, co-op Slayer, player-owned Slayer dungeon, contract farming, power slaying, and more. So why should you train Slayer? Well, first of all, Slayer is a great way to gain combat and invention experience. It doesn't matter if you have a new account or if you're a returning player with a already well-trained account, Slayer is always a great option for combat training. Slayer is also a reliable way to get charms, as most Slayer creatures give a decent amount of charms. And they're also decent money at the higher levels. The lower levels of Slayer aren't really that profitable, but once you get to the mid to higher levels, you do end up getting some Slayer creatures that can make you some decent money per hour. Slayer is that skill that unlocks unique and interesting monsters for you to kill, and most of those monsters you unlock at the higher levels are really good money as well. 120 Slayer is also a completionist cape requirement, and having 109 Slayer or higher will get you access to the Magister boss. There are quite a lot of skills that are useful to you if you are training Slayer. I will quickly be going over these. Invention is a skill that lets you perk up your gear to benefit you during Slayer, like giving you damage boosts or just speeding up your tasks. Herblore is a skill that lets you create powerful potions like overloads to boost your stats, or help you with potions like super antivirus against dragons. Summoning is a skill that lets you summon familiars that can hold items, heal your character, or deal extra damage like a Steel Titan. Very useful for Slayer or power slaying. Prayer is a skill that lets you get access to curses at level 92 and 95 prayer, 92 getting you access to Soul Split, which heals you and is very useful for AFKing tasks, and at 95 you get the damage boosting prayers like Anguish, Torment, and Turmoil. Dungeoneering is a skill that lets you get access to various Slayer dungeons, which can be used to speed up kills, get extra spots if a world is very busy, or get you access to some very special monsters like Edimu. The 99 cape also has a lot of teleports that can get you to a lot of Slayer creatures really quickly, however this requires level 99 dungeoneering. Next up we have the useful items list, and there's even more useful items than you can see on this list, and don't be shocked, there's a lot of items that are useful but you don't necessarily need them, they just help. I'll briefly be going over these useful items, and for some of them like the Slayer helmet, I'll talk a little bit more about these in depth later on in the video. So the Slayer helmet gives you more damage and accuracy on task. Auras can heal you, gain you prayer points, or give you extra damage. Some examples of this would be the Vampirism Penance or Berserker auras. The Charming Imp, which costs 100,000 dungeoneering tokens, can pick up and crush charms for summoning experience. Drop cleaner items are extremely useful for Slayer because they can just crush items and you'll never have to think about them again, like the Bone Crusher or Bone Picker to pick up bones, Herbicide, Seedicide, the Gold Accumulator to pick up coins, and the Gem Bag and Herb Bag. The Enhanced Excalibur, unlocked from the Heart Sage Village tasks, is also a very useful item because you can heal yourself every 5 minutes. This will save you food in the long run. The Blood Amulets, which passively heal you, which can be made by combining an amulet, let's say an Amulet of Fury, with a Blood Necklace shard, which will cost you a bit, will also save you a lot of food. Scrimshaws like the Scrimshaw of Sacrifice or Vampirism will help you out. The Scrimshaw of Sacrifice is actually a really useful item for the mid-levels of Slayer because it gives you 50% extra Slayer experience at the cost of all of your drops, so if you have really bad tasks but you want experience, you can use this. However, it is expensive. The Dungeoneering necklaces can be very useful in combination with the Bone Crusher and Soul Split because you'll have unlimited prayer and healing. Armor Spikes can help you with quicker melee tasks, which can be smithed. The Ancient Elven Ritual Shard is pretty much the Enhanced Excalibur, but then for prayer, which actually gives you back some prayer points. The Cannons can be useful for power slaying. You have a ranged melee and magic version, and the melee and magic version are made with Invention. And you have the 99 Slayer and Dungeoneering Cape, which can give you useful teleports, the Slayer Cape giving you the Slayer Master teleports, and the Dungeoneering Cape giving you teleports to the various Slayer locations. I quickly want to mention, if you have the Slayer Lodge Tier 3 on Anachronia, aka the Land Out of Time island, you will not have to wear your Slayer helmet because you can just add it to the stand and you'll get the damage and accuracy bonuses throughout Gillanor. This means you can wear any other helmet while slaying. The Anachronia Base Camp Spa also has some other benefits like poison immunity and constitution or life points boost. There are also useful abilities for Slayer, which I do have a separate video on, but I'll quickly go over them if you're interested. There's the Ice Asylum ability unlocked from the Dig Site quest, which gives you a group healing effect when used. There's the Tuska's Wrath ability, which does mad damage on task, which is unlocked from the minigame called Animal Islands for 4,000 reward points. We have Death Swiftness and Sunshine, both unlocked from the World's Waste quest, which are basically like a 7x7 area that spawn after using the ability that give you a damage increase. And we have the Corruption Shot and Blast abilities, which are both AoE bleed abilities, either for ranged or for magic, which can be bought on the Grand Exchange by buying a Maz Capability Codex. And trust me, these corruption abilities are amazing for Slayer, especially if you're power slaying. Here are the quests you can do for Slayer experience. Now I highly suggest you start off by completing the Smoking Kills quest before you do any Slayer whatsoever after level 35. Because this way you'll get double the Slayer points per task and you'll unlock the Simona Slayer Master. Trust me, you'll want to complete this quest after 35 Slayer. Otherwise you'll miss out on a lot of rewards and Slayer points. So the general gear examples for Slayer. Now hear me out here, these are not the definitive Slayer setups. There are many variations. You could use hybrid armor even, or you could use higher tier armor for higher tier Slayer tasks, or power slaying like Virtus or Trimmed Masterwork. But these are some general gear examples. Tier 70 power armor has half the drain rate of the tier 80 armors like Anima Core, so you're better off using this armor if you're using augmented armor and you want to save yourself some money on Divine Charge, which you should be doing so that you can maximize your profit. You could alternatively also just use tier 70 armor unaugmented or tier 80 armor unaugmented and you'll do just fine. It's really up to personal preference. I like tier 70 armor just because it's more than enough really, for most Slayer tasks. So for the weapons, you want to use your best weapon obviously for magic and ranged, but for melee you want to focus on halberd type weapons only unless you're doing something like Val Blooms or dinosaurs. So you want to be using stuff like Crystal Halberds, Masuta's War Spear, Dragon Rider Lance or a Noxious Scythe if you have the money for it, because you can hit more monsters around you using your AoE abilities like Hurricane and Quake, because Scythe or Halberd type weapons actually have extra attack range. During Slayer you always want to be using a luck ring unless you have a fear of dying and losing a lot of money, like on a very hard Slayer task during power slaying, something like Ripper Demons. But generally speaking, you want to be wearing your luck ring, so Luck of the Dwarves or a Ring of Fortune. For your glove slot, if you have the money, you want to be using Cinderbanes because they are best in slot for Slayer, because most monsters can actually be poisoned. If not, just use something like Subjugation, Bandos or Armadillo Gloves or Gauntlets. For your amulet, if you have the money, you want to be using a Blood Fury for that passive healing, otherwise just use a regular Fury, and if you're using Soul Split on task, a Amulet of Souls may sometimes be the better option. Of course, always wear your Slayer helmet unless you've got the Dinosaur Tooth base camp upgrade thingy at Anachronia, so you don't need to wear it anymore. And a God Book is always nice for passive stats. A Rune Pouch is nice for your runes to save inventory space with magic. And finally, for melee, Armor Spikes are of course useful to speed up your task. You can smith these yourself. If you are using augmented armor, you want perks like Biting, Genocidal and Crackling on your body. And of course the Slayer perks, so Undead, Demon or Dragon Slayer for extra damage against the Undead, Demons, Abyssal Demons or Dragons, like Rune Dragons, Adamant Dragons. It all helps speed up your Slayer tasks and experience. And for your legs you want Scavenging for the Invention components and Impatient. Now you don't per se need these perks, but they're just good to have. Some tasks may actually require you to have Enhanced Devoted for power slaying, for example, like with the Moss Golems, aka the Lost Grove creatures, which you can power slay using a cannon. And this is a problem with doing a Slayer guide. Slayer creatures are so diverse that everything is subjective and up to personal preference, but at least you have a general idea of what to use when slaying. Let's move on. Here are the main Slayer Masters you want to be using for your Slayer training. You can use certain Slayer Masters after reaching a certain combat level, and some also have a quest and Slayer level requirement. All of this information is on screen now. Now let's say you have level 100 combat and 50 Slayer. You do not want to be taking tasks from Vanica anymore. You really want to go up a Slayer Master to get those extra points and harder tasks that may or may not make you more money and get you more combat experience, instead of sticking to a lower level Slayer Master, with Simona being the only exception for AFK training, which I'll explain later on in the guide. Please note that Mandarith is a Wilderness Slayer Master requiring level 85 Slayer who only assigns tasks of creatures you can kill in the wilderness, and he has a special reward system. More on that later. Now, depending on the Slayer Master, you also receive more points per Slayer task, and every 10 tasks and 50 tasks you get a point bonus, aka a reward for completing that many tasks. The image on screen also shows you each location of every Slayer Master. If you need this information, please pause the video. Now, there are many things you can spend your Slayer points on, but you want to focus on these things. The first of which being getting your Slayer helmet. You will have to buy the ability to make the Slayer helmet for 400 Slayer points. You will then have to combine a spiny helmet, earmuffs, a nose peg, a face mask, and a black mask for around 1.8 million GP in cost to make your first Slayer helmet. By adding a Hex Crest and Focus Sight to the regular Slayer helmet, you will then get a full Slayer helmet. The Slayer helmet can then be upgraded and upgraded again for more Slayer points, eventually adding into the best Slayer helmet being the Corrupted one. Now, the full Slayer helmet gives you protection against Slayer creatures and also gives you a 12.5% damage and accuracy increase on tasks when equipped. Now, the second thing you want to focus on at the higher Slayer levels is preferring or blocking tasks. You want to prefer tasks you like, or ones that you can AFK if you like AFKing, and block the tasks that have very bad experience and slow, like for example grot worms. Though a prefer and block task is rather personal and really depends on what you like and don't like. And finally, at the high levels, if you've fully upgraded your Slayer helmet, adding things like a Bone Crusher or the Herbicide, Seedicide, Gold Accumulator and stuff to your tool belt is also a nice thing to spend your Slayer points on. These rewards will cost you 500 Slayer points each. You also have the ability to do Co-op Slayer, more on that later if you want information, but Co-op Slayer rewards are mostly cosmetic, so pets and stuff. The points you get per task depend of course on the Slayer Master, but one reward I'd say you want to get if you do a lot of co-op Slayer is get the Partner Shared Potion Effect reward. So whenever you sip a potion, your partner gets a part of that effect for a short period of time. You can even share super anti-fires or overloads if you were wondering, which is really cool if you do a lot of co-op Slayer. You also have the ability to do a Reaper task every single day. Now, Reaper tasks are essentially the same as Slayer tasks, but instead of creatures, you kill bosses. These Reaper points you get as a reward from each task can actually be used to get you loot beams, Hydrix gems, reduce instant costs, get you the ability to create a Book of Death, and much more. You get 10 extra Reaper points every 10th task and 50 extra Reaper points every 50th task. You can also see Reaper tasks as a way to make money if you save up your points and buy the Hydrix gem and then sell it for over 25 million GP. Slayer training can be split up into normal Slayer, co-op Slayer and AFK Slayer training, and then you have some extra things like Wildy Slayer, your personal own Slayer dungeon aka the Sunken Pyramid, Shattered Worlds XP farming and contract farming. We will be covering all those topics in this order. To start out your Slayer training, go to Turiel located close to the Birth Rope Lodestone. The Slayer skill summed up in one sentence is you go to a Slayer Master, you get a Slayer task, you kill a certain amount of monsters, you complete your Slayer task, and you return to your Slayer Master and repeat the process. If it's your first time doing Slayer, I highly suggest you get yourself an enchanted gem by trading the Slayer Master and buying one so that you can check how many kills you've got left during your Slayer task. What's even better is that you can track how many Slayer creatures you have left by turning on a Slayer counter. Press escape and go to game settings. Then go to general. Then under optional interfaces you can find the Slayer counter option. Turn it on. Now, as you guys can see, I actually got the option to choose between two Slayer tasks when getting a task. This is because I have VIP Slayer tickets. These tickets are obtained through various methods from boxes and minigames like Cabbage, Face Punch, Bonanza, but I wouldn't worry about these too much at the lower levels. They are, however, a nice touch to Slayer at the higher levels so that you can get more tasks that you like. For your low level Slayer training using just the Slayer Masters, use Turiel for levels 1 to 20 and Mazgna for levels 20 to 35 or 40. Or if you have higher combat stats, just do some Reaper tasks like the Chaos Elemental, KBD or Giant Mole, which are the 3 easiest bosses in Runescape. If you can kill them, because 4 Reaper tasks is only 4 days of doing 1 Reaper task a day, they take about 10 minutes, and once you're done you get a large chunk of experience and it will bop you up in terms of Slayer level really quickly. And if you don't have the combat stats for these bosses, don't worry, just do some low level Slayer and you'll get familiar with the Slayer system rather quickly. Levels 35 to 40 or 50 Slayer, you want to be using the Slayer Master called Simona. This will require you to complete the Smoking Kills quest, but you want to complete this quest anyways for double the Slayer points from each and every task. Tasks you want to do with the Slayer Master at this level are Cave Crawlers, Black Demons, Fire Giants, Calphites, Iron Dragons, Dagonoths and Dragons, because these tasks are the best Slayer experience. Now, you do not want to prefer or block any tasks because this will cost you 100 points. Just stick up with the boring and lame tasks because you want to save up your points for the Slayer helmet, which will set you back 400 Slayer points for the ability to craft a Slayer helmet. Levels 50 to 75 Slayer, you want to be using the Slayer Master called Duradale, which requires the Shiloh Village quest. This is also the location the Slayer Master is at. The tasks you want to be doing are Black Demons, Aviancies, Dragons, Dagonoths, Fire Giants, Water Fiends, Firewatches, if you have the quest of course, Dust Devils, Steel Mithril Dragons and Hellhounds. Also, don't prefer or block any tasks during these Slayer levels. Again, save up your points. You could potentially skip tasks that you really hate, but just stick with them for now. Level 75 to 85, you're going to be using Curdale as your Slayer Master. The tasks you should do are Automatons, Aviancies, Black Demons, any Dragons task, Celestial Dragons, Gargoyles, Glaciers, Steel Dragons, Calphites, Mithril Dragons, Tormented Demons, Water Fiends, Abyssal Demons for sure, Ascension members which are good AFK money, and Muspa if you have the quest. Preferred tasks, I still suggest you should save your points, but you should definitely be blocking Grot Worms and Aberrant Spectres at this point, because they are very slow experience. If you get a Slayer task that is not on screen on the tasks you should do, you can still do that Slayer task. The ones on screen are just the best for Slayer experience, just so you know. At level 85 Slayer, you get access to Morvran if you have the Plague's End quest complete. The tasks you want to be doing at Morvran are Gemstone Dragons, Nightmares, Aviancies, Lava Strikeworms, which are in the wilderness by the way, Living Wyverns, Glaciers, Gargoyles, Rune Dragons, Lost Grove Creatures, Ripper Demons, if you like them that is, otherwise block them of course, Water Fiends, Corrupted Creatures, Archaeomammoths, Firewatches, Muspa, and Ganodermic Creatures. Now the preferred tasks and block tasks are really up to personal preference, but I would definitely block all the tasks that are high weighted and really bad experience like Dagonoths, unless you need charms, Aberrant Spectres and Grot Worms, and some other ones of course. But preferred tasks, I would recommend Abyssal Demons, Corrupted Creatures and Gemstone Dragons because those are really good experience and AFK. Abyssal Demons are the best experience, but they're good money and they're just overall a really fast and AFK task. At this point you can also start skipping tasks that you rarely get but just don't like, which will cost you 30 points. But overall, Slayer at this point becomes profitable, good common experience, good charms and just a lot of fun. I must add, if you don't have Plague's End, you can still use Curdale up to level 90 instead if you wish to. At level 90 Slayer, you get access to Laniakia, which I cannot pronounce properly, aka IKEA Girl, which is much easier to pronounce. The special with this Slayer Master, apart from her being the best Slayer Master in the game, is that she assigns cluster tasks. For example, instead of getting red dragons, blue dragons, or black dragons, she assigns dragons, so you can kill any dragon you want to kill. The same can be said for strike worms, and this is really cool. The tasks you should do are Vile Blooms, Dinosaurs, Gemstone Dragons, Nightmare Creatures, Dragons, the cluster task, Lost Grove creatures, Ascension members for the money, crystal shapeshifters, living wyverns, lava strike worms, glade cores, abyssal demons, firewatches, shadow creatures, muspa, soul devourers, and just anything you wouldn't block or skip you want to be doing. At this point, you want to do Slayer the way you want to do Slayer. So therefore the prefer and block tasks are up to you, but I recommend blocking all the tasks you don't like or the ones that are bad experience. Also, at this point your combat level is probably higher, so let's say if you have a Dragon's task, you can also do QBD or Elite Dungeons 2 for your Slayer task as well, and get that Slayer damage and accuracy boost from your Slayer helmet while bossing. Just a little tip. If you have a friend or clanmate you want to do co-op Slayer with, you can also do this by setting up a group using your Slayer helmet or enchanted gem by right-clicking it. To start co-op Slayer, you need to have no task active, or the person you're doing co-op Slayer with has to have the same task active. An example of a situation where co-op Slayer could be really useful is when you're doing a crappy task you don't like and you didn't have the points to skip it, or you just didn't want to spend the points to skip it, and you see someone else doing that same crappy task. You can both go into co-op mode and finish that task quicker to get it over with. Some information about co-op Slayer: blocked tasks are not shared during co-op. The only person's blocked tasks that are used are the person that is actually getting the task. Slayer points gained per task depend on how many kills each player has done per task. So if one player is leeching and only did 10% of the kills, they will only receive 10% of the points. All Slayer experience gained during the task is your own, so if you kill a Slayer monster, you get the experience, and if your co-op partner kills a Slayer monster, they get experience from that monster and you don't get any from that one. If you want to cancel a task during co-op mode, both players actually have to cancel their task to continue to get a new task. Most of the co-op Slayer rewards are cosmetic, but some rewards are quite nice if you tend to do co-op Slayer quite often, like the reward where you can share potion effects. For example, if someone sips a overload, you get 2 minutes of that overload. Really cool. Co-op Slayer is just a fun way to train Slayer in my opinion, especially if you're on voice chat. After level 105 Slayer, you get access to Soul Devourers, and you can do the AFK Slayer method to 120 using Simona. You want to have a certain amount of Slayer points to prefer and block tasks for this method. You want to prefer corrupted creatures, Soul Devourers, crocodiles, Calphites, Scabarites, and Dust Devils, which are all in corrupted form in the Sophonem Slayer dungeon. You want to be blocking all other high-weighted crappy tasks like Banshees, Grotworms, Aberrant Spectres, Basilisks, Cave Crawlers, Cave Horrors, Kurasks, and Desert Strike Worms. Every 10th task you can also do a task at IKEA Girl instead to get those extra Slayer points, and you can also do tasks like Firewatches because Simona also assigns these, which are also AFK. This way you'll have points to skip the other tasks you have not blocked. If you like AFKing like I do, using aggression potions, feathers of mat, and just chilling in that Sophonem Slayer dungeon because the chest actually collects all drops except the rare drops and the keys to the crossing, this is a perfect method to train AFK to level 120 Slayer. If you want to have some fun, you can also do Wilderness Slayer at level 85 Slayer and beyond. The Slayer Master for this is Mandriff. The special he has is that he only assigns wilderness tasks, so you can only kill those creatures in the wilderness. You gain Slayer points and upgrade your bounty emblem when completing tasks for him. The first 4 Slayer tasks for the wilderness do not, however, give you points. Now there isn't much of an incentive to do Wilderness Slayer because the experience is low, the risk is high, and most monsters don't make you that much money except for the Wildy Worms, which make you consistent money. You do however get occasional Adrenaline Crystal drops during your tasks which make you some money, but apart from some lucky drops with Revenants or with Wildy Worms, you won't be making that much money from, let's say, Fire Giants or Green Dragons. The Wildy Worms are the only real consistent moneymaker in the wilderness, dropping their Searing Ashes. If you do Wildy Slayer for about 112 tasks, I believe, without getting PK'd, you can actually get yourself a tier 10 emblem, which you can then trade in for the tier 87 weapons like the Obliteration or Decimation Bow. Now the thing with Wildy Slayer is, it's a fast way to farm points, at least I think so. It feels that way, but the main reason you want to be doing Wildy Slayer is for the fun and just entertainment of it, and the main reason I wanted to do Wildy Slayer myself was just, instead of looking for people to PK, because PKing is fun, you do Wilderness Slayer and you just wait until someone comes and attacks you and you just PK them instead, and that way you don't get bored waiting or looking for people in the wilderness. So yeah, if you don't necessarily care that much about XP and you just want to have some fun, Wilderness Slayer is a great option to do after you've gained whatever goal you wanted to gain in Slayer in terms of experience. Next up is a feature that has been in the game for a bit. It's called the Personal Owned Slayer Dungeon, aka the Sunken Pyramid, which is accessed by going to the Ports District in Menafos and then taking a ship to the Sunken Pyramid. Now in this Personal Slayer Dungeon you have 3 chambers. Each of these chambers can be filled with 5 monsters, but you first have to collect the souls of these monsters in Ushabtis. You get these by killing Slayer monsters, and with a bit of luck they are placed in the Ushabti. You can also use a French dungeon instead if you don't want to bother collecting the souls, because for Slayer creatures from levels 85 and beyond it does take a while, even on task. You get these Ushabtis by talking to the ghost using a ghost speak amulet if it's your first time here, and she will give you some depending on your Slayer level. The best monsters to get souls for are Capsarius, 2 Dark Beasts, Spiritual Warriors, Crystal Shapeshifters, Shadow Creatures, and Muspa, and generally speaking these monsters are all good to AFK because they spawn faster and they're just nicely set in your personal owned Slayer dungeon. This is a great way of obtaining wealth by AFKing Slayer creatures off task. Another great way to obtain Slayer experience, especially if you're a higher level player with a low Slayer level because you train combat at, let's say, the Abyss, you can actually power level your Slayer up by doing Shattered Worlds and buying huge experience lamps which cost 6 million anima each. Now hear me out, if you're a high level player using a Noxious Scythe or Dragon Rider Lance, you can easily get over 30 million anima per hour. And that's excluding the weekly challenges that can give you even more anima. You can also get a Shattered World Slayer contract for 500k anima, which gives you Slayer experience for killing certain creatures in Shattered Worlds, just to add on top of the experience rate you would be getting from the huge Slayer lamps. As you guys can see, I made a little overview in Excel. If you're a high level player and you're doing worlds 80 plus and stuff, you can easily get over 60 million anima per hour. It's not that hard, but yeah. It's a fun mini game, and if you're interested in doing this but you don't know anything about Shattered Worlds, I will leave a guide link in the description below covering everything you need to know about Shattered Worlds. Another way of training Slayer, though not that effective, is contract farming at the Mauritania Slayer Tower. You're going to be killing abyssal demons constantly using the Slayer Tower contracts, which are 200 kills each, getting you around 50k Slayer experience per hour. If you're planning to camp abyssal demons for, let's say, invention and 120 strength or something, this is an option to get a little bit of Slayer experience every day when you're camping them, or every day if you're doing one Slayer task, using your Slayer mask for the abyssal demons for a forced daily task, you get a little bit of extra experience getting a contract. Another way of training Slayer is power slaying, which is basically not caring as much about your expenses and using stuff like cannons and your max gear to quickly finish off tasks and get that very high Slayer experience per hour. Now the gear and inventory example on screen are just to show you or make you think about certain things you should bring. There is not one definitive gear setup, however power slaying will require you to have high level gear and access to high level things like overloads. You know, the 99 Slayer and Dungeoneering Cape will help you out with teleporting and just boosting that Slayer experience per hour and just minimizing the time you're spending getting a new Slayer task or walking around. Being maxed of course and having access to the max guild also helps a lot. Some other things you want to think about are a bladed dive switch for bladed diving and you're surging around to minimize that time you're walking, overloads, weapon poison ++, extra food, a cannon and cannonballs for extra damage or getting the monsters to attack you, aggression potions or flasks. Bring your drop cleaners if you don't have them on your tool belt, like the Charming Imp, Bone Crusher, Bone Picker, Spring Cleaner and stuff like that. You know, keep in mind, this is power slaying, it's sweaty Slayer or just trying to get as much Slayer experience per hour, so this is not something you're going to be doing at level 50 Slayer, for example. Now, I'm going to be referring to a spreadsheet that was made by a player called Jonathan, who actually documented every single Slayer task power slaying, or just trying to get as much Slayer experience per hour. He has documented the amount of kills he gets per hour, the Slayer experience per hour, the common experience per hour, what he prefers in blocks. For every single task, he actually has a video showcasing what he uses and how he progresses through the Slayer task. These aren't guides with commentary over them, instead he uses text to show which items he uses, and for some videos he doesn't even show that, he just shows the Slayer task. Jonathan's spreadsheet is a perfect example of showing how much experience per hour you can actually get if you really try at your Slayer tasks. However, you probably won't come close to these kills per hour or experience rates per hour if you're AFKing or just not paying attention, not using a cannon, which is why I showed the gear setup earlier. I personally don't power Slayers often because I like to AFK, but it is a way of training Slayer and sometimes it is quite fun. So yeah, his spreadsheet is linked in the description below. I might actually make my own version of this spreadsheet, but then just doing AFK tasks to give you guys more accurate information on every single task in terms of experience rates. Finally, two alternative ways of training Slayer. The first one being a possibility if you're a skiller. It's Scarab stomping, which can get you up to 1720 experience per stomp. While doing this, you do take damage, so be sure to bring some food along to eat up to keep on stomping scarabs, basically. Now, there's a French chat called Soul Obby, which calls Soul Obelisks and Scarab worlds. Just so you guys know, if you want to hop worlds and do multiple of these in an hour, let's say if you want to get 99 Slayer on a skiller, this is a way to do it. And another way of training Slayer is by using Slayer dummies, which are obtained from event boxes and of course from Treasure Hunter, which is MTX. But it's a way of training Slayer, and if you have them, you can get up to 1 million experience per hour without bonus experience if you're level 99 Slayer or higher. If you have a few of these and you want to train Slayer, I suggest saving them up for double experience weekend to get so much more experience out of these skilling dummies. With that being said, I hope you guys enjoyed this guide and found it helpful, and please leave a like down below if it helped you out because I put a huge amount of time into making this guide. If you have any other skills you want to train and you need a guide, I do have them on my channel, linked in the description below, and I'll catch you guys in the next video. Peace.